On Mother's Day, my son gave me a diamond necklace, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "Mom, you deserve the very best." A few days later, I found a loan application tucked in his car. He'd forged my signature and used my house as collateral all without my knowledge. That so-called expensive diamond necklace, just like every word out of his mouth, it was fake. He thought I was old, half-blind, and still too soft-hearted to see through him. He was wrong. I knew everything. I was just waiting for the moment he laid all his cards on the table. I always assumed this Mother's Day would be quiet, just like the ones before. Maybe a routine phone call, maybe a text, maybe nothing at all, just another ordinary day. For the past 5 years, Josh and Chelsea rarely even showed up. But that Saturday morning, just after sunrise, Josh called. "Mom, we're coming by around noon," he said, voice slightly rushed, trying to sound casual. "Got you a little something. Hope you like it." I paused for a second, then replied, "All right, I'll make lunch." After I hung up, a strange unease settled over me. Sunlight poured through the kitchen window, and the lilacs out front had just begun to bloom. I took the beef I'd been saving from the freezer and laid out the white embroidered tablecloth, the one I only ever used on holidays. Just before noon, Josh's car pulled into the driveway. He stepped out and called out loudly, "Happy Mother's Day, Mom." Chelsea followed close behind, holding a small, neatly wrapped jewelry box. She wore a pale blue dress that looked expensive, her lipstick darker than usual. I noticed her quietly closing the trunk, as if she didn't want me to see what was inside. They brought more than the gift. A bouquet of flowers and a bottle of white wine came in too. I took them, smiling at the gesture, but something inside me tightened. "What's this?" I asked as I sat down on the couch and opened the jewelry box. Inside was a delicate necklace. The chain was silver white and fine as thread, with a single diamond pendant in the center that sparkled under the afternoon sun. Josh sat down beside me, grinning. "Beautiful, right? My friend at a boutique in New York helped me pick it out. I saw it and knew it was perfect for you." "It really is beautiful," I said, brushing my fingertips over the pendant. It felt cool to the touch. Chelsea, placing the wine in the fridge, turned and smiled. "Josh spent all week stressing over which one to get. He said this one was just your style, simple and elegant." Josh beamed even wider. "Wasn't cheap, either, $5,000. But for my mom, worth every penny." The two of them in sync, saying all the right things. I wasn't used to being treated this thoughtfully. I looked down at the necklace and felt my throat tighten. It wasn't the price tag, it was that moment, that flicker of belief that maybe, just maybe, they remembered I was still the mother in this family. Lunch was livelier than usual. I made roast beef and scalloped potatoes. Chelsea complimented my seasoning, said it tasted like something out of a fancy restaurant. I knew she was just being polite, but I smiled anyway. Halfway through the meal, Josh raised his glass. "Mom, you're the most important person in our lives. Truly." I put down my fork and looked at him. My only son, 35 now, works in real estate and off, job to job. He moved out at 18 and rarely looked back, especially after his father passed. Aside from asking for money once in a while, we hardly saw each other. But just then, in that brief moment, it felt like he had come home again. Like the little boy who once ran crying to me after scraping his knee. The kid who used to write to my favorite mom on birthday cards. After lunch, while I was rinsing dishes in the kitchen, I overheard Chelsea whisper something to Josh in the living room. I couldn't make out the full sentence. Just one line. "She's happy. It will work." I shut off the faucet and dried my hands. Outside, the maple tree in the yard swayed gently. The rustle of its leaves sounded almost like someone murmuring in the wind. My chest tightened, just a little. Not from fear, exactly, just a quiet tug, like my instincts were trying to tell me something I wasn't ready to hear. That night, I hung the necklace on the mirror beside my bed. The pendant shimmered in the soft glow of the night light. I stared at it for a long time. Maybe I should stop second-guessing. At my age, a thoughtful gift should be enough. Maybe they really were trying. Maybe I should let go of old disappointments and believe, just once more, that family remembers your worth even if they'd forgotten for a while. I turned out the light, a single thought floating to the surface. If their father were alive to see this, maybe he'd be proud. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have guessed, was that the real Mother's Day gift was the conversation Josh and Chelsea had in the car before they left. I woke up early the next morning. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, landing squarely on the mirror. The pendant on the necklace reflected a sharp, glinting speck of light like a cat's eye, watching me. I stared at it for a few seconds, and a familiar phrase popped into my head. It was something Loretta, my next-door neighbor, liked to say: the shinier something is, the more likely it's a fake. Loretta and I had known each other for nearly 20 years. She used to work at a jewelry store, retired now, but before that, she was the head of sales. She had a knack for spotting things. People, stones, intentions. She read them all too well. Sometimes too well. It could be uncomfortable. I opened the window and saw her outside trimming her rose bushes, wide-brimmed sun hat shading her face, her hands moving with practiced ease. I stepped off the porch and called out, "Morning, beautiful day." "Huh." She looked up and gave me a once-over. "You're looking good." "Evelyn, how was Mother's Day?" I walked over and pulled the necklace from the pocket of my robe. "Take a look. Josh gave me this yesterday. Said it's a boutique piece. Had a friend bring it back from New York." Loretta squinted, turning it in her fingers, testing the weight, then narrowed her eyes at the stone in the center. After a long pause, she said lightly, "It's pretty, but are you sure you want to know what it really is?" I hesitated. "You think it's not a diamond?" She handed it back gently. "Can't say for certain, but in my experience, real diamonds don't usually come on chains like that. And if it were from a New York boutique, Josh wouldn't be handing it over in a cheap plastic box." She paused, studying my expression. "If you want peace of mind, I can take you to my old store tomorrow. Harold still runs the place. The equipment's still there." A knot tightened in my stomach. It wasn't fear that the necklace might be fakey, it was the thought that I might have been fooled by my own son again. "All right," I said, forcing a smile. "Can't hurt to check." The next morning, Loretta pulled up right on time. We drove across town to an old jewelry shop down by the coast. The sign out front read, "Since 1953. The display window was filled with vintage brooches and men's pocket watches. A little outdated, but clean, polished. Inside, a man in his 60s greeted us. Harold, Loretta's former boss. I handed him the necklace. He slipped on gloves, examined it under a magnifier, tested the metal with a pen tool, then slipped the stone under a blue light detector. 5 minutes passed. Then, in a quiet voice, he said, "This isn't a diamond. It's cubic zirconia synthetic. Probably worth 45, maybe $50 tops. Cheap stuff. Common for gift scams." My brain went blank for a moment. I nodded. "Thank you." Back in the car, Loretta didn't start the engine. She looked over at me. "You want to say it out loud?" I stared ahead, toward the parking lot exit. Cars passed, coming and going. Every one of them might have held someone like Maya Mother, or someone like Josh. I don't know if he did it on purpose. I said quietly, maybe he really didn't know. Maybe someone sold it to him and he believed it. Loretta didn't say a word, just glanced over at me. I gave a small laugh. Maybe he's just clueless about jewelry. Maybe it was really meant to be thoughtful. "Maybe," she said finally. "But if it was truly thoughtful, why name drop a New York boutique? Why mention how expensive it was?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know how. By the time we got back, it was nearly noon. She patted my shoulder before getting out of the car. "You don't have to make any decisions right now. Just remember, sometimes learning to see through people is the only way to stop getting hurt." I nodded. After she left, I went inside and tucked the necklace into the bottom drawer of my vanity. I didn't confront Josh. Didn't call. I told myself Loretta was probably overthinking it. Maybe I was too. But that night, lying in bed, I heard a quiet voice in the back of my mind whisper, "You don't not know. You're just not ready to be sure." The pendant still hung from the mirror, catching the nightlight's glow. But now, it didn't feel like a cat's eye watching me. It felt like a warning. I had just come out of the grocery store when Josh called. "Hey, Mom, I'm at your place," he said with a cheerful tone. "Are you home? I wanted to drop something off for you." I just stepped out. I told him, "Give me 10 minutes. "No worries. I'll wait," he said and hung up. I loaded the frozen groceries into the insulated bag, got in the car, and headed home. Normally, I'd loop through downtown, but something unsettled me. I couldn't explain it, just a gut feeling. I took a shortcut and arrived 5 minutes earlier than planned. When I pulled up near the corner of my street, I saw his car still parked in front of my house. He hadn't gone inside. He was leaning against the driver's side, talking on the phone, loud enough that I could hear every word from inside my car. "Relax." He chuckled. She can't tell the difference. She still has that necklace hanging by her bed like it's treasure. I froze, my hand resting on the door handle. I'm telling you, he continued, once this part's done, I'll have her add my name to the deed. 800 grand, mortgage free. When she's gone, the place is ours. He paused, his voice taking on a smug edge. Come on, $50 for a fake necklace in exchange for a whole damn house. That's a hell of an investment. I stayed in the driver's seat, my hand gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart sank, like someone had driven a heel right through it. And no, it didn't sound like a joke. His tone, it wasn't playful. It was smooth, casual, like he was discussing a deal he'd already sealed. I opened the door slowly and stepped out. My legs felt unsteady. The moment Josh saw me, he snapped off the call. His smile flickered, then vanished. Mom, you weren't supposed to be back yet. Shortcut didn't have any traffic, I said, trying to keep my voice even. He quickly pasted on his concerned son face. You get a lot at the store. Want me to grab the bags? It's fine. They're still in the trunk, I said, pausing just long enough. Weren't you dropping something off? He blinked, like he'd forgotten the cover story, then reached into the passenger seat and pulled out a paper bag. Right, lavender tea. You mentioned it the other week. I saw some in town and figured I'd grab a bag. I took the bag from him. The scent was familiar, almost comforting, but in that moment, it made my stomach turn. I stood there on the porch, holding the tea, and realized I didn't want to step inside. Not with him. How have things been? I asked, keeping my voice light. Josh didn't expect the question. Me, good, I guess. Work's been busy wrapping up quarterly stuff. Chelsea's been shooting weddings again. You know how it is, just trying to keep up. I looked him in the eye, searching for a trace of guilt. There was none. His face was calm, tired in the way people get when they're juggling things but not guilty. Josh, I said, steadying myself. What would you do if I just disappeared one day? He blinked. What, Mom? Don't say stuff like that. You're fine. Don't be morbid. No, really, I said. Would you move in the next day, redecorate the place, slap your name and Chelsea's on the mailbox, and forget I ever lived here? This time, the smile cracked. He froze for just a second too long. Mom, what are you even saying? His voice dropped, defensive. Where's this coming from? You think I'd do something like that? I stared at him. God, how badly I wanted to throw his own words back in his falsetto scream about what I just heard. But I didn't. I wasn't ready. Not yet. Just a thought, I said, forcing a smile. Random. He didn't stay long. Claimed he had a client to meet and left in a hurry. I stood at the doorway, watching his car disappear around the corner. Then I took out my phone and saved the recording I'd made because the moment I opened my door and heard his voice, I'd hit record. Yes, I recorded him. And for the first time in this whole mess, I didn't feel guilty about it. Now I knew this wasn't about a misunderstanding, or poor taste in gifts, or even a clumsy attempt at reconnecting. He planned it. He'd taken my emotions, me hope, my love, and turned them into a strategy to steal my home. I tossed the bag of tea straight into the kitchen trash, walked into the living room, and stood in front of the framed photo of me and his father taken 20 years ago. Josh was just a kid in that picture, maybe 7, smiling like an angel. I stared at it for a long time, a single thought echoing in my mind. I wasn't mistaken. I see it clearly now. He's using me. After that day, I spent the next few days listening to the recording over and over again. Josh's voice was crystal clear. Every word etched itself into my memory, especially that line. $50 for a house. That's a steal. Every time I heard it, it chilled me a little more. I didn't take the recording to the police. Not yet. I didn't tell Loretta, either. I wanted to give Josh one more chance. Not because I still believed in him, but because I needed him to say it. I needed to hear it from his own mouth. Watch what he did next. I needed him to show me his hand. A week later, he texted. He said he wanted to talk in person, that he had something on his mind. Chelsea was out of town on a photography job, and he was coming alone. I stared at that text, heart beating slow and heavy. At 6 p.m., just as I pulled a tray of roasted salmon and vegetables from the oven, the doorbell rang. Josh walked in with that well-rehearsed smile like he'd stepped right out of a family commercial. Smells amazing, Mom, he said. You're still the best cook I know. I gave him a nod and a faint smile. Just something simple. We sat down to eat. He didn't talk much, trying to act natural. But I could see Itha's eyes kept drifting to the file cabinet on the far side of the room. That cabinet held everything: the deed to the house, tax forms, old bank records. Halfway through the meal, he put down his fork, cleared his throat. Mom, I've been thinking a lot lately. I'm worried about you. Worried. I dabbed my fingers with a napkin. I'm doing fine. You are, he said, nodding. But you're not getting any younger. You live alone, and if something were to happen, he trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. I set down my napkin and looked at him. So, what do you want to move back in? Take care of me. He waved it off with a chuckle. No, I want you to stay independent. I'm just saying, the house is still only in your name. Right. There it was. The real main course. Yes, I answered slowly. It's the house your father and I spent our whole lives working for. I know, he said, pausing. I just think maybe it's time to plan ahead. Avoid the hassle later. You could add my name to the deed, or transfer it now. Not because we want anything, just to keep it in the family. Make it easier to manage. I smiled, but not the warm kind. It was the kind of smile you give when you've heard the same excuse 100 times and finally stopped pretending to believe it. I saw an article the other day. I said calmly. A woman signed her house over to her son, trusting he'd take care of her. A week later, he kicked her out. Josh's expression shifted. He leaned back in his chair, voice suddenly lower. What are you getting at? You think I'd do that? I'm just talking about what I read, I said, holding his gaze. But if you weren't that kind of person, why are you so eager for me to sign something? A flicker of panic passed through his eyes. But just as quickly, it turned to irritation. Mom, what's going on with you lately? You're suspicious of everything I say. You're imagining things. No, Josh, I said, voice cooling. You're hiding things. Like that necklace you claimed was from a boutique in New York. It's a $50 fake. He froze. Then, right on cue, slipped into his usual role, the misunderstood victim. Are you serious right now? He snapped, voice rising. My friend said it was real. How the hell would I know it's fake? What? Now I'm a liar too. Am I not even allowed to make a mistake? I didn't flinch. So, you trusted your friend. Or maybe you just assumed I wouldn't know the difference. And figured it wouldn't matter if you lied. That hit home. His mask cracked. What's that supposed to mean? His face darkened. You think I'm ungrateful, that I'm after your house. You think I'm some selfish jerk who doesn't care about his own mother. Do you even hear yourself? I stayed quiet, just watched him. He took a step closer, and his voice turned sharp. Maybe living alone this long has made you paranoid. I bought you a gift to make you happy, not to get grilled like a damn criminal. He scoffed, shaking his head. Fine. Maybe I won't come around anymore. Maybe I'll stop bringing gifts. Stop trying. If you're so set on being alone, go ahead. Have it your way. There it was again, that old trick. Guilt, manipulation, emotional blackmail, wrapped in a son's voice. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. If you really cared about me, I said, rising from my seat, gathering our plates, you wouldn't need me to lower my guard just so you could get what you want faster. His face twisted. Darker now. Meaner. I know you're old and scared, he muttered. But not everyone is out to get you. I'm your son. You think I'd screw you over? I looked at him and said nothing. At the door, he turned back and hurled one last line at me. Fine. Think what you want. I was trying to help you. But if you're going to treat me like a scam artist, then maybe you should die alone. The door slammed behind him. The smell of caramelized glaze still hung in the air. But the room had gone cold. I sat back on the couch, touched the side of my phone, and saved the recording. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't Hedofthement. He had already decided who I was in his story, a gullible, aging woman who'd hand over everything with a smile. But he got it wrong. I'm not blind. I'm not weak. And I'm not the kind of mother you can lead around by the nose. I'm not the kind of person who makes decisions on impulse. Especially not after 60. By then, you learn that crying and falling apart won't fix a damn thing. Clarity does. So does control. The next morning, I skipped the farmer's market and called Loretta, asked her to come by for tea. By the time she arrived, I had a pot of Earl Grey steeping and a fresh lemon pie cooling on the counter. As soon as she walked through the door, I hit play on the recording. She didn't say a word as Josh's voice filled the room. She can't tell the difference. $50 for a house. Total bargain. When the recording stopped, she sat in silence for a few seconds before speaking. Evelyn, I know this isn't easy to hear, but you can't wait any longer. He's not testing the waters already in the pool. I nodded. I know. You gonna report him? Not yet. I sipped my tea. First I need to patch the bottom of my boat before I end up sinking with it. Loretta gave me a knowing look and reached into her bag. She handed me a business card. Karen Price. We were close in college. Before she retired, she handled trusts and estate law. Detail-oriented, sharp, and no-nonsense. I looked down at the card, crisp font, and a small law firm logo printed clean across it. She still takes clients. She only sees people through referrals now. Loretta gave me a wink. You're exactly the kind of case she'd say yes to. That afternoon, I called and booked an appointment for Friday. Karen's office was tidy and understated, much like the woman herself. She wore a deep green suit, gold-rimmed glasses, and had the calm authority of a senior bank manager who knew more than she let on. I laid it all out for her: the necklace, the recording, the attempt to get me to sign papers. She listened without interrupting, nodding thoughtfully. When I finished, she said, "You've done the right thing. Evelyn, what you need now is a living trust and a new will." I blinked. I always thought that kind of stuff was for people with yachts and stock portfolios. She smiled. No, trusts aren't for the rich. They're for the smart, the ones who want to protect their homes, their rights, and their peace of mind. She drew a simple diagram on a legal pad as she explained. Right now, the house is under your name alone. As long as you're mentally sound, you control it. But if you're ever hospitalized or declared cognitively impaired, and there's no trust in place, a legal heir can petition to manage or change ownership, especially if they bring in a doctor's note. She tapped the table. What you need is this. 1. Set up an irrevocable trust and place the house in it. 2. Designate a trustee. 3. Draft a new will that explicitly disinherits Josh and Chelsea. I hesitated. Disinherit sounds so final, cruel, even. She took off her glasses and looked me in the eye. Evelyn, your son is making plans for your house for after you're gone and you're still young and healthy. He's not waiting for your permission. Why are you? I inhaled deeply. Let's do it. She nodded and started pulling papers. When I signed the first document, my hand trembled slightly. Not from doubt, but from something unfamiliar power. All these years, I thought growing old meant getting used to being sidelined, to watching other people decide for you, to shrinking inside your own life. But right then, I understood something new. You're never too old to make a choice. Not as long as you're willing to see people for who they really are and see the game they're playing. That afternoon, back at home, I pulled out everything: the deed, my birth certificate, my husband's death certificate, the old will. I organized it all into a new file folder and locked it in the drawer of my desk. Then I hid the key inside an old shoebox in the laundry room. After dinner, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. My hair was silver. My face had lines. But my eyes, they looked clear. Fierce. Even. Softly, I said to my reflection, if you want all this, then you better be ready to pay for it. After that argument, Josh disappeared for a while. 2 weeks said no calls, no texts. I didn't reach out either. The house was quiet again. Like the early years after his father died, when I first learned how to live alone. I thought he might be giving me the silent treatment for good. But one morning, as I was pruning the roses in the yard, I heard a familiar knock at the front door. I put the shears down and opened it. There he was, Josh, holding a box of my favorite pumpkin pie and a bottle of Italian dessert wine. Mom, he said softly, I've missed you. I froze for a second, but then stepped aside and let him in. What are we talking about this time? I asked, placing the wine in the fridge. Nothing, he said, keeping that apologetic tone. I came to say I'm sorry. I turned around and looked at him. He sat at the table, head lowered. I shouldn't have spoken to you like that. I've been under a lot of pressure. Chelsea's work is unstable. I've got a loan hanging over my head. I thought if we got the house stuff sorted, it'd take the weight off everyone's shoulders. But I was pushy. I admit that. I didn't answer right away. He looked up, eyes a little red. You're my mom. I shouldn't have treated you that way. He rarely called me mom, with that kind of softness anymore, only when he needed something, or when he knew he'd gone too far. It's not that I don't believe you want to help, I said slowly. It's that I think you figured out what you'd get before you ever figured out how to give. He dropped his gaze again, nodded. So what about now? I asked, watching him carefully. Do you still want me to add your name to the deed? He shook his head. No, really. I just want you to be happy. I've been thinking about things. We're all we've got. I shouldn't have let a house come between us. It was the kind of line that sounds like it belongs in a movie. His expression so sincere. I almost bought it. That day, he walked with me around the neighborhood trail. Said he wanted to see if the wisteria had started blooming. He even brought up a memory I thought he'd long forgotten when he was a kid, planting strawberries in the backyard, only to get stung by a bee and cry like the world had ended. You were like a superhero, he said with a grin, grabbed ice and yelled at the bee for being rude. For a moment, I wanted to believe him. Loretta called me later that night. She'd seen him leave and wanted to check in. I told her he'd apologized. Watch his actions, not his words, she said. People don't change in monologues, they change in patterns. I nodded, didn't argue. Then, on the third visit Sunday afternoon, his mask slipped for the last time. He picked me up for lunch by the lake, just outside town. On the way back, he stopped for gas. While he was inside, I sat in the passenger seat, bored, rummaging through the console for gum. My fingers brushed against something firm, a thick envelope wedged into a side compartment. I hesitated, then pulled it out. Across the front, in bold type, loan application, property secured. I opened it. First page, me home address. And on the signature line, my name, written in the same flourished cursive I used when I was younger. Josh had seen it before. Studied it. Practiced it. My fingertips turned cold. The paperwork detailed a loan of $500,000, secured against my house. Labeled urgent family liquidity request. My hand started to shake. I closed the folder and shoved it back, trying to keep my breathing even. When he returned, he smiled and climbed in. Gas station still runs on cash, can you believe that? Beautiful breeze today. Wanna watch a movie when we get back? I turned to look at him, giving him the smallest smile. Sure. Sounds good. I said nothing else. Because whatever needed to be said wasn't for him. Not anymore. That night, the first thing I did when I got home was call Karen. I need to lock down the title immediately, I said. And I want to start documenting everything. Officially. She was quiet for a beat. Then, calm as ever, said, so you're ready now? Yes, I said. He's not probing. He's executing. And I won't let him finish the job. I hung up and walked to the window, watching the streetlights come on. One by one. Earlier that day, he called me Mom, reminisced about strawberries and childhood summers. It almost felt real. But Josh never understood memories are for honoring, not for leveraging. He thought he'd soften me. What he didn't know was that I was only waiting for him to finish the act. I used to think the hardest part was hearing Josh talk on the phone about how to get my house. I was wrong. The hardest part was realizing that on the very same day he smiled at me, said he just wanted me to be happy, and handed me a cup of tea, had already forged my name, and was trying to cash in my house behind my back. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying his voice in my head. The tone, the warmth, the way he said, Mom, your happiness means everything to me. Yes, my happiness. That's what he said while sending a forged loan application using my signature and address to the bank. The next morning, I went straight to Karen's office. This time, there were no pies, no small talk. I opened my bag and handed her the photos I'd secretly taken of the loan documents in Josh's car, along with the voice recording. Karen reviewed every page slowly, carefully, then closed the folder and said in her calm, deliberate tone, we can take two routes. First, we file a trust freeze with the county recorder, formally invalidating any unauthorized loan activity. Second, we back up your recordings and photo evidence, and create a formal incident log. From now on, everything gets documented. I nodded. I'm done waiting for his next move. She slid another form toward me. Also, consider installing a recorder in your car. If he makes any direct threats or talks specifically about handling the property, we'll have usable proof. I'm not soft anymore. I told her. This isn't a misunderstanding. He's trying to strip me down. We agreed to submit the legal paperwork the following week. I also began setting up an irrevocable trust. Under the new structure, once the house was placed in the trust, one would retain full use of it. But no transaction could take place without my explicit written consent and the presence of legal counsel. It was the first time in this entire ordeal that I didn't feel like someone guarding a door. I felt like someone building a fortress. And Josh, he was still playing the good son. That evening, he dropped by again, this time with a bottle of red wine and a smile. Said he wanted to look at old photos together. He sat on the couch, flipping through pictures of me and his father when we were young. Mom, I had the best childhood, he said, eyes glassy with nostalgia. You and Dad gave me everything. I sat across from him, smiling faintly. You've got your own family now. You're the one in charge. He smiled gently. But I never forgot what you both taught me. I didn't respond. I just reached into my pocket and quietly tapped the record button. Mom, he paused, tone shifting. Have you given any more thought to putting the house stuff in order? Not trying to pressure you, I just worry. If something were to happen, it could get complicated. I gave a non-committal nod. I've been thinking about it. Yes, but I worry. What if I sign something and suddenly I'm not part of the family anymore? Josh let out a light laugh. Mom, come on. Of course not. You're the heart of this family. We'd never do that. Then came the next line, softer, but pointed. But if you keep making this hard, we might have to come up with our own solution. Right. My stomach turned. What do you mean? I asked, watching him closely. He laughed louder, waving a hand. Kidding. Don't be so tense. I'm here to share a drink, not push paperwork. He swirled his glass and changed the subject. But I knew. That wasn't a joke. A few days later, I played the recording again. This time, I used software to amplify the quieter parts and I caught something new. As he stood to refill his glass, just near the mic, his voice came through, low and crisp. If she'd just hurry up and die, I wouldn't have to keep jumping through all these hoops. That line didn't just hurt. It nailed shut whatever door of hope I'd left cracked open. I hit pause, uploaded the file to Karen's evidence vault. Then I picked up the phone and called the local police. Not to file a full report. Not yet. Just to create a record. Forged signature. Attempted fraudulent mortgage. Pending legal action. I reserved the right to pursue charges. The officer was professional. Took my statement. Told me I could request a preventive action flag. An alert that would freeze any suspicious transactions initiated by a relative, especially in situations involving medical or financial authority. I hung up and leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Outside, the sky had gone dark. The motion light over the yard flicked on, casting a glow on my closed front door. That door used to be open to Josh, always, but not anymore. From now on, it would only open for someone who earned the right to walk through it. I chose a sunny morning on purpose. Not because the weather lifted my mood, but because Karen said it was best to let the sunlight bear witness. She came with me. I carried everything, the trust documentation, the updated will, notarized letters of disinheritance, and most importantly the clause that made it all official. Josh opened the door with his usual smile, though I saw his eyes pause half a second too long on Karen standing behind me. Mom, you're early. He stepped aside. Come in, Chelsea just made coffee. Chelsea peeked from the kitchen. The second she saw Karen, her face tightened. I skipped the small talk, walked straight to the coffee table, unzipped my document pouch, and pulled out the red-stamped envelope. Josh, I came today to tell you something official. His smile lingered, but his eyes flickered with unease. What's so official? Karen sat beside me, voice steady. Ms. Evelyn Barnes has finalized all her estate plans. As of today, her assets, including this property, are under legal trust protection. Any action taken without her written consent is considered unlawful. Josh's jaw twitched. What is this? Some kind of joke? I unfolded the document and read aloud. Per Section 7, Josh Barnes and Chelsea Barnes are excluded from all forms of inheritance, per the disinherited clause. This status is now filed with the Public Estate Registry. The air thickened. Chelsea was the first to react. She stood abruptly. Evelyn, you've misunderstood something. We never asked to inherit. I looked at her. You didn't have to. You just stood there and let him do it. Josh finally spoke, voice raised and raw. You really did this. You hired a lawyer and cut me out of your life without even talking to me. I talked to you, I said calmly. The day you sat across from me and told me your friend swore that necklace was real. That was strike one. Then you took me for a drive and hid loan papers with a forged signature in your car. Strike two. And then, in my own house, you said if she'd just hurry up and die. Strike three. His face drained of color. You recorded me, he hissed. You seriously went behind my back and recorded me. What kind of mother does that? That stopped me for just a second. But then I stood, steady and certain. If you really saw me as your mother, you wouldn't have wished me dead. You wouldn't have forged my name. You wouldn't have treated me like some gullible old woman too slow to notice you circling. Chelsea opened her mouth, but Josh threw up a hand to stop her. He stepped toward me, fury radiating from his eyes. So this is it. You'd rather die and leave it all to strangers than let your own son have anything. Karen rose quietly, placing herself between us. Her voice was calm, firm. You need to step back. Josh, everything you've done is on record. If Ms. Barnes chooses to call 911, you'll be facing charges of emotional coercion, attempted financial interference. He froze. I looked him in the eye. No more fear. No more shaking. Do you remember, when you were little one winter you fell, had a bloody nose, and I carried you inside. I pried open the freezer with my bare hands to grab an ice pop and cool you down. You cried, Mom, don't leave me. He said nothing. I believed you'd remember that moment forever. But everything you've done tells me otherwise. You left me a long time ago. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, but the words never came. I turned and walked toward the door. Karen gathered the documents. Before leaving, I looked back at him one last time. You said I wasn't your mom anymore. I said quietly. So let's stop pretending to be family. Karen and I stepped out into the sun. And in that moment, it felt like I finally walked free from the shadow I'd been dragging behind me all these years, the shadow of being someone's mother who was only ever needed when something was being taken. Now, I was something else entirely, a woman who finally stopped begging to be valued and started choosing herself. I didn't think Josh would come back after that. After the disinherited clause was signed, sealed, and filed, there was nothing left to say, not legally, not emotionally. It wasn't just a document. It was the final punctuation on our relationship. But I underestimated his inertia. It wasn't love that kept him orbiting, might was leverage. 2 weeks later, I was out front watering the hydrangeas when my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize lit up the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Mom, it's me. Josh's voice was hollow, tired, like it had traveled too far to reach me. Can we talk? He asked. 10 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I'm home, I said, and hung up. 30 minutes later, his car pulled into the driveway. He looked thinner. His hair was a mess, his face unshaven, and his blazer was so wrinkled it looked like it had been crumpled in a ball at the foot of someone's bed. I didn't invite him in. We stood on the front porch. The sun was beating down on his forehead, and he squinted, lifting a hand like he was finally lowering his pride. Mom, he started, I know you're disappointed in me. But I've really messed up. I didn't respond. Not at first. This time it's bad. He said. The mortgage didn't go through. They flagged the signature during the video verification. Said it didn't match the ID. My accounts are frozen. The company's doing an internal review. I've been suspended. He said it like he was talking about someone else. Chelsea left, he added, with a weak laugh. Packed her bags and went to her mom's. Said she didn't know anything. That it was all me. I let out a long, steady breath. She's not wrong. It was all you. He looked at me then, really looked, his face cracked open just enough to let desperation show. Mom, I know I screwed up. I wasn't thinking straight. I panicked. I'm sorry. But please, can you give me one more chance? Just one. What do you need? I just need a guarantor. A bridge loan. 100,000. I'll pay it back. As soon as things get back on track. I swear. He reached into his blazer, like he was going to show me paperwork. I cut him off. Josh, do you know how this sounds? My voice was quiet, measured. You sound exactly like you did 5 years ago, when you wanted money for that startup. He hesitated. I didn't know what I was doing then. No. I said softly. That's not true. You knew exactly what you were doing. You've always known. You just thought I'd always play along. He opened his mouth. Mom, I'm serious. I raised a hand. I know you're in trouble. I believe that. But I'm not the same woman who used to hand over deeds just because her son smiled and said the right things. He went silent. Finally, after a long pause, he muttered, You've changed. I nodded. Yes, I have. I've changed into someone who doesn't confuse love with surrender. I've changed into someone who finally understands that the word son doesn't mean I owe you my life savings. He looked like he wanted to argue, but there were no words. I took a breath, steady and final. You want to call me heartless? Go ahead. But it's you who taught me I had to be. You pushed me here. Because if I didn't get hard, you were going to devour me whole. The silence between us stretched thin. In the distance, I could hear the neighbor's sprinkler ticking through its cycle tick, tick, tick like a slow countdown to something we both knew had already ended. I didn't wait for his reply. I turned and walked back inside, closed the door behind me. Through the wood, I could hear him linger a moment, then the crunch of gravel under his shoes as he walked away, each step heavier than the last. That evening, Loretta knocked on my door, holding a plate of her famous carrot cake. I told her everything. She patted my shoulder and said, "You did the right thing. He didn't need help, he needed another way to use you. What you cut wasn't a relationship. It was a cycle." I smiled, just a little, but it was real. Because now I understood real kindness doesn't mean letting yourself be used. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is finally say no. It took me 3 full months to recover from the storm. Not physically, nothing ever laid a hand on me. But mentally, it was a clearing out. A deep clean of every disappointment, every silence I swallowed. Every time I gave Josh the benefit of the doubt when he hadn't earned it. Years of quiet heartbreak, swept out in one sharp gust. And in that empty space, I felt lighter. The trust was now active. The new will finalized. On Karen's advice, I also drafted a healthcare directive and financial power of attorney, so that no matter what happened to Mino, one could overrule my choices. I went to the bank and opened a new account, removed every shared authorization. No more linked access. No more blurred lines. The teller, a young woman with kind eyes, asked, "Would you like to add an emergency contact?" I smiled. "No, thank you. I can handle everything myself now." My life didn't suddenly become extraordinary, but it began to move at my own pace again. I started volunteering once a week at the public library, helping seniors with reading, sorting files, sometimes just sitting beside them while they talked. I also signed up for a Saturday ceramics class at the church rec center. Every time I dipped my fingers into wet clay, shaping bowls and cups, I felt like I was reshaping something deeper, something inside me. And I did one more thing, just for myself. At a local market one Sunday, I found a booth run by a young single mom. She'd laid out rows of handmade necklaces, each with a little handwritten tag. They weren't expensive. They weren't flashy. But they were honest. I chose the simplest one, a blue stone, wrapped in rough twine. Uneven, imperfect, and quietly beautiful. She told me the necklace's name was Truth. I didn't hesitate. I bought it and fastened it around my neck. On the walk home, the breeze made the stone knock gently against my chest as if to remind me, "You're finally living for you." Then, I made one final decision. The house. It would belong to no one. Not Josh. Not anyone claiming blood or name. In my new will, I named the local women's shelter as its future owner. After I'm gone, it'll become Transitional Huizenga Place for women escaping harm, starting over with nothing but their names and hope. When Karen asked if I was sure, I gave her the only answer I had. This house has seen too many lies. I want it to hold only truth from now on. That weekend, I sat on the front porch in my rocking chair. I could hear the neighbors' kids laughing as they kicked a ball down the street. Loretta called from her yard. "Tea later." I nodded. As I stood, my fingers brushed the blue stone at my collarbone. It didn't sparkle like that so-called diamond Josh once gave me. No one would ever appraise it, or frame it in velvet. But it was solid, warm, real. Every time I touched it, it reminded me of one thing: freedom. I used to be the kind of mother who saw nothing. But now I'm the kind of woman who knows exactly what's real and what's worth keeping. He thought I couldn't see through him. But the truth is, I always could. I was just waiting for him to expose himself.